For today's video, we'll be taking a look at a premium ATX case by Phanteks, the Evolv X2. Available in black or white, the Evolv X2 stands out for its monolithic, three-sided tempered glass aesthetic. Let's see if it's any good. First things first, the packaging. The Evolv X2 comes in a brown cardboard box with your usual product illustrations and descriptions on all sides. The case is pretty well protected in the box too. We've got a whole bunch of foam protectors, cardboard corner protectors, as well as silicone protectors for the tempered glass panel edges. And the box of accessories that the Evolv X2 comes with is taped to the back of the case. In terms of accessories, the Evolv X2 comes with an instruction manual, a RMA information leaflet, a microfiber cleaning cloth, a DRGB adapter cable that is to be used to hook up the Evolv X2's built-in RGB LED access to your motherboard, or to compatible DRGB fans by Phanteks. We do also get a bunch of cable ties, as well as a plastic container of screws that also includes a tool that allows you to use a Phillips head screwdriver to install and remove motherboard standoffs with ease. In case you're wondering, the said standoffs already come pre-installed on the motherboard tray of the case. One thing that I really like about the manual is the fact that Phanteks has clear diagrams that illustrate quite clearly how best to do cable management with this case. It'll definitely save end users some time with figuring out which opening is best for which cable when building their PCs with the Evolv X2. With that, here it is, the Phanteks Evolv X2 in the flesh. The kind folks over at Corbel Technologies, the official distributor for Phanteks in Singapore, have sent over the black version of the Evolv X2 for this review, and for those of you thinking of building a white-coloured PC, Phanteks also has a white and silver variant of the Evolv X2 available. That said, the case sports a unique aesthetic that is monolithic and somewhat symmetrical in design, and is made of a combination of steel and tempered glass, with brushed aluminium finishes in certain parts of the case. As can be seen, the case comes with tempered glass front panels and side panels that allow you to fully showcase the components of your PC build. The power and reset buttons of the case are located on the top panel like so. And in terms of front panel connectivity, we get a 3.5mm headphone and microphone combo jack, 2 USB 3.0 Type A ports, as well as a USB 3.2 Gen 2x2 Type-C port located on the side of the case, closer to where one of the feet of the case is. Do note that the case does not come with a hard disk activity indicator light. The top panel of the Evolv X2 has these L-shaped ventilation slats for a top-mounted radiator or fans, and we also get an illuminated RGB strip that runs along the long edge of the top panel and terminates where the reset and power buttons are. Over on the bottom of the case, you'll notice that the Evolv X2 looks like it's standing on stilts. We get plastic feet on all four corners of the case that terminate in a rectangular slab of plastic, which creates space between the said plastic panel and the steel panel on which you mount your fans. This should definitely help with airflow by giving more space for the bottom intake fans to suck in fresh air into the case. That said, we get a removable dust filter that slides in and out of place like so. The rear of the case is a pretty standard affair, and it looks kind of industrial in a good way. And we get some pre-installed Velcro cable ties that are visible from the rear. These cable ties are used to cable manage the cables running behind the motherboard tray. The expansion slot openings have covers that are reusable, and to gain access to them, you'll have to slide out this side cover that is accessible once the tempered glass side panel is removed, where you'll then gain access to the screws of the expansion slot covers. Removing the panels of the Evolv X2 is a pretty straightforward affair, where first, you've got to remove the top panel that pops off easily. This then reveals the single screws that each hold the side tempered glass panels in place. Removing the front tempered glass panel involves the removal of 2 screws, with one screw located at the top, like so. The other screw is located near the bottom of the case. To get access to the bottom screw, you'll need to remove the plastic shroud as shown on the screen. With the screws out of the way, the front glass panel then slides out of place. On a side note, if you're new to the ALKtech channel, do consider subscribing so as to keep up to date with the latest product releases in the PC hardware world. With that, onto the interior, starting first with cooling features. The Evolv X2 doesn't come with any pre-installed case fans. That aside, the top of the case comes with support for up to 3 120mm fans or a 360mm AIO radiator with the dimensions on the screen. For ease of installation, we get a removable bracket that is held in place by a single thumb screw. And with the bracket out of the way, we see that there's some space here for your AIO radiator tubes to be tucked away for a cleaner appearance. Moving over to the bottom panel, as can be seen, we get openings for up to 3 120mm fans as well, and similar to the top panel, we get a removable bracket that facilitates the installation of fans on the bottom panel. The said bracket is held in place by a single thumb screw that can be found on the rear of the case. Finally, over on the rear, Phanteks has included a single opening that supports a single 120mm case fan. In terms of physical dimensions, the Evolv X2 is a pretty tall case with the dimensions that you see on the screen. For you folks intending to use an air cooler for your processor, do note that the case supports CPU coolers of heights no more than 170mm according to Phanteks spec sheet. I'd say most, if not all tower coolers with 120mm or even 140mm fans should fit into this case with no issues. It's worth noting that the Evolv X2 was designed with AIO CPU cooler usage in mind due to its airflow design that is sort of like a chimney stack. In any case, for the sake of variety, seeing as there are plenty of reviews out there of this case with AIO CPU coolers, I'll be testing this case with a CPU air cooler instead so as to see how the thermals are going to be like. More on this later on in this video. For your GPU, the Evolv X2 comes with support for graphics cards with lengths of up to 380mm and widths of up to 170mm. We also get an adjustable graphics card support bracket, which is a nice built-in feature to have. Fans of back-connect hardware will be pleased to note that this case comes with support for motherboards with rear connectors, so ATX motherboards from say ASUS's BTF lineup, Gigabyte's Stealth series, or MSI's Project Zero lineup will be compatible with this case. Finally, in terms of power supply dimensions, Phanteks indicates that the Evolv X2 has 250mm of length clearance for a power supply, which is plenty of space for modern high wattage PSUs. For those of you intending to install 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch drives for your PC build, the Evolv X2 comes with plenty of space for such drives. On the back of the motherboard tray, we get a removable bracket that is held in place by a thumb screw that can accommodate up to 3 2.5-inch SSDs. Over in the bottom compartment of the case that houses the PSU, we get a removable drive cage that is held in place by a thumb screw. We get a number of permutations of drives that can be supported by this said cage, as shown by this illustration on screen from the Evolv X2's manual. The front panel connectors of the case are a pretty straightforward affair, where we get a front panel USB 3.2 Gen 2x2 Type-C connector, a front panel audio connector, a front panel USB 3.0 Type-A connector, a 9-pin front panel connector for the power switch and power LEDs, as well as a 3-pin DRGB connector for the case's RGB LED accents. For the front panel connector, as can be seen, I really appreciate the fact that Phanteks has gone with a 9-pin connector rather than dual 2-pin standalone connectors, which can be more fiddly to hook up to the motherboard. With that, let's do a demo build with the Evolv X2. There's already a whole bunch of reviews out there with this case and AIO CPU coolers, so for this review, I'm going to buck the trend and install an air cooler instead, just to see how the thermal performance is going to be like. Now, getting the motherboard into the case was a pretty straightforward process, where the motherboard standoffs are already pre-installed on the motherboard tray. If need be, you can simply use the included motherboard standoff mounting tool to reposition the standoffs. Moving things along, and with the demo build nearly completed, it's a good time to talk about cable management. I appreciate the fact that the Evolv X2 has this large metal cover that totally obscures the area behind the motherboard tray where you run your cables. So in that regard, there's really no need for much cable management per se. In any case, we still get Velcro straps in strategic positions to help guide your cables to where they need to be, which is great. I do also appreciate these rubber grommets located along the side of the motherboard tray, which go a ways in making the cables running to the motherboard look a little neater. As can be seen, I've managed to fit in a really large graphics card into this demo build, the Gigabyte Aorus GeForce RTX 4090 Master 24G, which measures in at a hefty 358.5mm by 162.8mm by 75.1mm. Now, due to the height of the card, I've had to run the 12V HPWR power cable in a way such that the connector wouldn't get into the way of the tempered glass side panel. For this demo build, I've got 6 of Phanteks M25-120G2 case fans installed. As I don't have the reverse blade variant of these fans on hand, I made do with the standard blade variant for the bottom intake fans. All in all, the demo build with this case is shaping up nicely, where it sure is looking pretty clean. And with that, here's a completed demo build with the Evolv X2. On the whole, I think the case looks pretty unique, all thanks to the way that the graphics card looks like it's floating within the build. I also do appreciate these RGB LED accents that add a touch of flair to the case. In terms of thermal performance, I did a quick performance benchmark with the Evolv X2's demo build, where you can see the specs of the said build on the screen. With F123's in-game benchmark, where I ran a 5-lap test for around 9 minutes in total, the Ryzen 7 7800X3D processor in the demo build achieved an average CPU temperature of around 66.6 degrees Celsius, while the Aorus GeForce RTX 4090 Master 24GB achieved an average GPU temperature of 67.1 degrees Celsius, as well as an average GPU hotspot temperature of 77.3 degrees Celsius. These results were achieved in a non-air conditioned room with an ambient temperature of 30 degrees Celsius. The case fans, CPU fans and GPU fans were left on their default fan curves, where for the case fans in particular, they ran at an average of 1414 RPM for the duration of the benchmark. For the sake of comparison, I did the same benchmark run with the same hardware setup, this time with an open-air test bench instead, and the test setup in this instance achieved an average CPU temperature of 65.1 degrees Celsius, while the RTX 4090 achieved an average GPU temperature of 66.7 degrees Celsius and an average GPU hotspot temperature of 76.8 degrees Celsius. In conclusion, I think that the Phanteks Evolv X2 is a breath of fresh air given its interesting appearance, all thanks to its somewhat monolithic, 3-sided tempered glass aesthetic and the fact that the graphics card has sort of like a floating appearance in the finished build. I do think also that the white variant of the case looks even nicer, all thanks to its white and silver colorway, but I guess this is pretty subjective. Fit and finish of the Evolv X2 is good too, and the PC building experience with this case was pretty positive, and I don't really have any complaints in that regard. Thermal performance wise, I was kind of surprised that an air cooler still works decently well with the hardware setup that I had for the demo build, where the CPU and GPU temperatures were not too far off to that of having all the test components on an open air test bench. Again, do bear in mind that your mileage may vary, especially if you're intending to use different hardware such as a processor that draws a lot more power under load, perhaps something from the AMD Ryzen 9 lineup or Intel's Core i9 series. I guess if you're using something that is easy to cool, such as the Ryzen 7 7800X3D that I use for the test build, using an air cooler with the Evolv X2 might not be such a bad idea after all. With that, thank you so much for watching, hit the like button and get subscribed if you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys around the next time.